Hello guys and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you a Terran vs Protoss opener, which I've been playing around with a lot recently, and it's basically centered around Hellions and Marines and attempting to put a little bit of pressure on the Protoss while setting up your own expand. So let's get right into it. So Protoss have been playing quite greedy recently, and it's kind of hard for a Terran to put pressure on them because brute force attacks where you just attack the front just don't work anymore because the mothership core exists. So it's impossible to do bio timings at the front, it's impossible to do tanks, banshees are not very good. So we're looking for a way to actually be aggressive and take control of the game. So the way we're going to try and do that is basically using Hellions and Marines coupled with a medevac. And the reason why this works is because Hellions and Marines let you attack in multiple locations, which helps circumvent the mothership core and the Nexus cannon, or it lets you elevator and actually get into the main and avoid just running headlong into the mothership core at the front, which is one of the big issues that you can have. So since we open up gas, it lets us be more flexible in dealing with various Protoss all-ins and various variations the Protoss can do, because there's no guarantee that you're going to go into a game and find a Protoss that basically opens up with an expand build and not an aggressive build. So having the gas lets us be aggressive, and we're going to make sure that we scout at appropriate times to kind of figure out what the Protoss is doing. If we happen to spot an all-in coming at us, there are ways we can adjust the build to be on the defensive rather than to be the aggressor. Another great thing is even if the opponent knows that this build is coming, there are enough ways for us to randomize our attack pattern, enough to actually get in there and do the damage that we need to do. But let's get right into the build. So the build opens up with a very normal depot after 9 supply, and after that we're going to have the SCV that's building the depot basically make it 12 racks, and then we'll keep building SCVs and make it 13 gas. So far, pretty normal. One important thing to note is as we approach the 14 supply, we're going to rally our SCV on 14 supply down, and we're going to use that to scout. The reason we scout is basically we want to know where his units are, we want to know if he expands, and we want to be a little bit flexible in what we do. So here we're going to rally down the SCV on 14, and we're going to do a smart little depot block here. So basically, when you send this guy out, make sure that he goes on the outside, and then you're going to build a depot and hit cancel building right away. So make sure the SCV actually stays on the outside, and basically this way we can always deny a scout. So an important thing here is we can always have this gas no matter what when we do this depot block. So we're leaving a little bit of ambiguity for the Protoss to basically guess whether or not we have gas. You can always do this depot block, and you can even expand and do this depot block. So we're keeping the Protoss guessing. A little timing is also, if you see a probe scout show up right now, you know that's a scout off a 13 gate. Any scout that comes earlier or later is something that should make you a little bit suspicious, like, am I getting proxied? So there's that. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the guy at the ramp basically build the next depot, and we're going to rally him back to build a factory as soon as this depot is done. Make sure you keep building Marines, make sure you get your command. Now, thinking a little bit about where do we put our factory, and ideally we want to put it somewhere that's not that easily scouted by the mothership core. So on a map like Belcher Vestige, the most safe spot is probably right down here. You could put it down here, but that's a little far away. We just want it right here. This is a good spot. If you put it up here or over here, it's a lot easier for the mothership core to sneak in and scout, and the mothership core should never come in from this direction because you can shut it down. So here we're scouting. I'll go a little bit over scouting information later, but we're just checking what's going on. So basically our goal with this scout is to figure out, is he expanding or is he playing one base? 2 gases, a lot of gas, we should be careful. Obviously a nexus tells us everything we need to see. So here we're constantly building Marines, and as we get close to 23 supply, we should essentially drop a depot here. You can delay it a tiny bit, but you want to drop the depot. And the guy building the factory, you basically want to start a Hellion as soon as you can, and then follow it up with the start point. Rally the Hellions back. We have no intentions of showing our Hellions, so we just want to keep everything hidden and not actually show our hand if we can avoid it. Now, while you're scouting with this guy here, you just want to keep track of where are his units. Do you actually need the Hellions to defend? Because some Protoss build actually are aggressive enough that you need the Hellions to help the Marines. But for now, I'll go with that a bit later. But for now, we're just keeping a scout on the map, making Marines. So it's the interesting part. When this depot finishes, you basically want to start the next one. The positioning isn't that important, but these depots are basically to spot for the mothership core, because if I didn't know where it was, I would use these to spot for it, so I can use 3 Marines to actually try and deflect the mothership core from seeing what we're trying to hide. So here, as the last Hellion finishes up, we want to use the Marines to clear the map a bit, which again I will cover a little bit later of how the unit movement works, and then we're going to move out with the Marines. When the Hellions and the medevac is done, we're going to move out. So our goal when we move out is basically we want the medevac and 3 Hellions, and then we want a good group of Marines. I have 7, usually have 7 or 8, depending a little on how it goes. I could pick up this last one as well. So you have 8 Marines, a medevac, 3 Hellions. That's your attack. Your setup is you have a front wall with 2 depots. You have 2 depots in your main spot with another one almost finishing as you're moving out. You have a factory and a starport, and you're going to put down and expand. You can see I have the money for it to expand. I'm just a little bit slow. I strongly recommend, as a last brush on the opening build, is basically rally your factory right back down here into your mineral line and make a winter mine. Make sure you burrow this winter mine, and the reason for that is if you're fighting against oracles, this winter mine shuts it down completely while you're attacking him. Get a reactor on this racks as soon as this marine finishes, and then we're essentially good to go. And that's the baseline of the build. In a later part of this video, I'll be covering a little bit more about the transitions you can do from this point and how you can attack with the units you have, and essentially also the small variations, the small scouting information we got if we wanted to adjust. But this is the baseline of the build. It's very simple. It should be very clean, and now you're good to go. So let's move on to the next part, talking about the tactics for when you attack. So now we're at the interesting part where we can talk tactics. So basically with this build, there are 4 major points at which what you do with your units really matter. The first one, which we're going to be looking at first, is basically your scout, your SCV scouts. What do you scout, and what do you do with the scout after you get the initial look at what he's doing? The second part is going to be about your early game Marines and fighting early game gate pressure and deflecting the mothership core. The third part is going to be obviously the attack itself. Hellions, Marines, how do we do it? The fourth part is going to be a little bit about how do we set up at home? What is our defense at home? So when we scout, we basically want to evaluate at first, do we think this is an expand or do we think this is an all-in? So in this particular game, basically this video isn't really going to cover early game Protoss and how it looks exactly. But the few general points is obviously the obvious ones is 1 gas basically means expand. We're not scared. The only thing you should check quickly when you see 1 gas is does he have like more than 50 chrono and is it going to the work gate like the cybercore? If not, we're fine. We know the gate is at home. We know the core is at home. Those are the kind of things we're looking for. Now, when you scout, you want to look a little bit about, or you want to look a little bit at the units that he's making. In this game, he actually made a pretty quick sell-out, which was already out when I showed up. And then he's making a stalker. So already now, we know it's a pretty, like, gate aggressive build. So at home, we want to be a bit careful. We'll just keep that in mind for a little bit later. And then you check for the nexus. Keep checking for the nexus. You can stay here for a while and you can go back in. And we just want to make sure that he expands. Obviously, this build expands. Now, in case that he doesn't expand, you scout a very, very early mothership core. If the mothership core actually pops while your SCV is in there before like 4 minutes, 4 or 5, you really should be worried because that's a very, very quick mothership core and he's going to pressure you. If you see chrono into the gate after just the first sellet, you want to be careful as well. And if you see double gas, you want to be careful as well. So basically, this is like the early game SCV scout. Another thing is you never really want to send this home. You can go here, but you're never going to want to go entirely back home. So what your goal is here is basically you want to stick around. As long as there's not a stalker out, you can stay here. And if he gets the stalker very early and kills the SCV, well, you know as a stalker you're going to play defensive anyways, because most builds these days gets like a Zealot, Nexus, Mothership Core, and then the stalker. So if the stalker is early, you should expect a bit of pressure anyways. So you basically keep the SCV around. Even if you see the Mothership Core, you can dance a bit back and forth. Don't let the Mothership Core shoot your SCV. Just run away, come in a couple of seconds later, check it's still there. Because if the Mothership Core moves across the map, you want to try and intercept it with your Marines. So now, having deducted a little bit about the early game scouting, we're going to look a little bit about our Marine movement. So when you think your Protoss will pressure you, I strongly recommend getting a bunker to basically make it look like you're expanding, and you need a bunker to be able to split up your Marines. You don't have enough Marines to defend both the front and deflect the Mothership Core, so you're going to put up a bunker, and then you're eventually going to send 3 Marines into your main, which is also when the depots would help a lot. As discussed in the build order thing, you can put a depot right here on this map, for instance, and a depot here, so you can deflect the Mothership Core. So here I'm actually looking for the Mothership Core a little bit. My SCV died to the Stalker, so I know the Stalker's at home, and I have a little bit of freedom to actually move around. And now we're just going to set up for trying to deflect the Mothership Core. Since he got like units early on, we're not going to try and claim map control with these Marines yet. We're just going to try and deflect the Mothership Core. So basically, the decision that we made was we checked, did he expand? Yes, okay, fine. We're going to be the aggressive. We're going to try and send both the Marines and the Hellions out. If he was doing an all-in, we would probably just send the Hellions out and keep the Marines at home for defense, because that's nice. Now, having identified that he expanded, okay, we know that now. Next step is he doing early pressure? Is he going aggressive with the Mothership Core? Well, in this case, the Mothership Core is really late, but if he actually had the Mothership Core earlier with the second gas, and the Stalker and the Solid, well, we can't really defend both the main and the front, so we need a bunker. There is the option you can always put a bunker on the high ground or keep everything in the main, but it makes it a little more obvious what you're doing. I generally recommend getting the bunker. It slows you down by like 5 seconds, but I think it's worth it. Now, if there wasn't early game pressure, if there was just a Zealot straight into Nexus, then a Mothership Core, and not this Stalker, we could send the Marines out more, sure. We already discussed using the early SCVs to keep track of the Mothership Core, and if the Mothership Core ventures across the map without early Stalkers, well, we can just send our Marines out, try and catch the Mothership Core, try and get out, like bait out a slow field, try and make it recall. We just want to stop it from basically knowing what we're doing. So that's the essence of the early scout is check for expansion, check for early game pressure. If he pressures, play defensive. If he doesn't, take map control. It's obviously obvious. And keep track with the SCV scout of where's the Mothership Core as long as you possibly can. You're going to lose the SCV eventually, but you want to keep it around for as long as possible. If you can keep the SCV alive up to this point in the game, it's super good because you know where it is. And then you adjust your Marines accordingly. If you pressures, play defensive, keep them at home. And if not, you want to take map control. You want to hunt down the Mothership Core if it moves out without too much support, and then set up their movement. So that's basically the early game. We're going to move on now to the actual attack. So there's 4 ways you can attack with this build. One of them is basically splitting up your Marines and your Hellions. So you send the Hellions in the medevac and the Marines in at the front. The second way is you send everything at the front. The third way is you drop the Marines and send the Hellions in at the front. And the fourth is you basically elevator in the Marines right above the ramp and send the Hellions to join with them. You can eventually end up elevating in the Hellions as well, but you elevate in right above the ramp. So there are a few ways to decide which of the attack types to use, and we'll just be going over them one at a time. So the first one is basically the Marines at the front and the Hellions being dropped. The way that this works is you're trying to use the Marines at the front to bait out a Nexus cannon, and then you're going to send in the Hellions to basically kill probes, because it's kind of hard for gateway units alone to deflect the Hellions while not having the Nexus cannon or slow field available. Now, the reason why you can actually force the cannon at the front is the gateway units are generally not enough to deflect the Marines alone. And if he has like an abnormal amount of gateway units, like more than 3, maybe 4, you can just back off with the Marines, still do the Hellion drop, and he's cut a lot of other stuff from his, like he's cut a lot of the greed out of his build to actually do that. Now, to go for this method, if you ever see the Mothership Core in the early game use its energy for anything, use this method. The reason why you should do this is if he doesn't have a Nexus Cannon, he basically can't defend in 2 places with the minimum amount of units he has. So you're guaranteed to do damage on one of the fronts, so go for this model if there's not a Nexus Cannon. So as you go about this, send in the Marines first, draw the attention, and then drop at the same time. If you can unload somewhere where you're not seen, that's great. But if you unload in vision, that's also generally fine, since most Protoss should expect a multi-pronged attack at this point. Now, you want to run the Hellions in and basically target down probes. So at this point, we're good to go. If the Mothership Core uses the Nexus Cannon in the natural, you back off with the Marines, like what's happened now. This specific location, or in this specific situation, I was so far in and I was getting shot at so much that I essentially can't get out because he puts both the Mothership Core and his units here, and we're just going to try and target down a couple of probes. But now the Hellions have free reign, and we're essentially going to slaughter everything in the main. If the Mothership Core had put the Nexus Cannon in the main, we would basically speed boost our medevac right on top of the Hellions, pick them up, and leave, and then retreat with the Marines at the front as we can. And as we're doing this, we have the freedom to send in the medevac with the Hellions again, either in the main or at the natural, as soon as the Nexus Cannon starts to dissipate. So this kind of aggression is always a 1-2 punch, and you can set up the build. So basically at home, you build another medevac and a couple more Marines, maybe some mines. So you can always keep up this multi-pronged aggression, because obviously when the Nexus Cannon dissipates, he doesn't have energy for another one, and we can do another attack, even if it's just with another medevac. I just wanted to show you guys another clip of the same type of attack that doesn't go that well, but where the mentioned follow-up attack actually wins the game. So here the Marines are pressuring at the front, the Hellions are being dropped in the main. And things just don't go that well. I end up not killing that many probes at all, usually I've killed 2, and the Marines here at the front are getting murdered by like a lot of units. So here, everything looks kind of bleak. I'm getting the Hellions out with the medevac, using the speed boost. We killed 3 probes. It's not a good situation. So at home, I made the reactor and I made the Widow Mine, which actually killed an Oracle. And then I'm going to bring in the next medevac with the mines. I'm just waiting for the second mine. And now we're going with the 2 mines and with the Hellions. The Nexus Cannon has dissipated, and now we're ready for the second wave, the second multi-pronged attack. So here, I'm just waiting for the second one to catch up, and we're going to do the multi-pronged attack here. So going in, unloading somewhere that's kind of hard, like you might not have vision of, and then going in it with the medevac at the same time. So here, he gets caught off guard by these, because he's busy with this. And then, look at this, 15 probe killed, 20 probes killed, 23 probes killed, and that's essentially the game, like he's dead right here. So here's like an example of how the follow-up attack can actually win, even though the first one didn't. And as you can see at home, like there's still enough room to actually macro behind this. We have a base. We're doing pretty well in worker camp, all that. Even here, if you end up not doing damage, you can still retreat with the Hellions, retreat with the medevacs, retreat with this, and just bring in another round. Once you get a little bit more bio, another medevac, you can keep doing this. It's important to keep like your units alive as much as you can if you don't deal critical damage. If you deal critical damage, that's fine. For the most part, you want to keep them alive. So just to go over the next mentioned type of attack is basically where you send in everything at the front. This should only really be used if you kill off early units. If he sends out a Solid and a Stalker, runs past your front Marines to check on expansion, lose them both. The Mothership Core joins up later, you make it use a slow field. Okay, well, he has no Nexus Cannon, he lost a lot of units, just go fucking kill him, like right for the front. Outside of those scenarios, you generally don't want to attack everything just at the front. So we'll move into the next scenario. So in this game, I'm going to show you the elevator play. So basically you want to load up your Marines and basically send them right above the ramp while sending in the Hellions to bait out the Nexus Cannon. Now, this particular game, it actually has a cannon in the natural, all his units there, but he doesn't use the Nexus cannon there. So he uses the Nexus cannon in the main. We're still going to elevator in because we want to force him to fight near the ramp, and then as the units come back, we bring in the Hellions to help. So here, if the Nexus cannon was in the natural, I would send down the medevac right here, and then pick up the Hellions and go into the main with everything. But since the Nexus cannon is in the main, we're just gonna basically fight our way back to the natural. We just have a positional advantage on him because he has to micro on 2 fronts, while we're essentially in between his army. So here, once you do the elevator play, you're basically trying to kill off most of his units. You're not exactly going after probes, but you're making it very hard for him to fight you, since 8 Marines and a medevac with Hellions is really, really strong against early game Protoss. So now you can just chip away at him wherever he's not, and then as soon as the Nexus cannon dissipates from one side, you can pressure him even more. Well, that's like the baseline of this type of aggression. You get to attackable fronts. Here he obviously over-defends a whole lot because he has cannons in both bases, which limits the damage you can do, but it also lowers his unit count, so you can kill him with like a follow-up aggression. Now, for varying it up and talking about the last style, which is basically you load up the Marines to go drop the main and send the Hellions at the front, you generally only want to do that if you're scouted while going across the map, because you just want to try and trick him a little bit, mind game him a little bit, vary up your aggression a bit. So you unload the Marines in the main, which is a little bit better against fighting the actual units there, and then you use the Hellions at the front. There's a chance that people will see the Marines unload and think, oh fuck, like everything unloads in the main and bring back the army, and then rely on just the Nexus cannon in natural. If he does that, you can send in a Hellion, you can roast a couple of drones, or probes in this case, and then leave again. If you know you're playing against someone that uses cannons a lot, especially cannons in the main, cannons in the natural are a lot more uncommon, but if you know you're playing against cannons in the main, then you can actually send the Marines with the drop there, because they can stand here, shoot probes a little bit better than Hellions can. So if you know you're playing someone who usually puts a cannon in the main, do the version where you send the Marines in the main, Hellions at the front. So now we've talked a little bit about the various types of attacks you can do and how to choose it. The elevator play is generally pretty safe, so unless you know that he has multiple gates, it's a pretty good way to go. And I think this should generally be the direction you're going, unless something else happens. So if you kill early units, get the Mothership Core energy out, you hit everything at the front. If you think he's kind of has like a good amount of units, you just want to have the Marines bait at the Nexus cannon at the front, drop the Hellions in the main, go for harass. This only works if there's no cannon in the main. So if you know he has a forge, if you know he likes cannons, maybe don't do that version. If you see anything that isn't a lot of stalkers, but if it's like Zealot, maybe one stalker, maybe Sentry, the elevator play is super strong, and the elevator play is also a lot more flexible in how to get damage, like where to get damage done. So I think this should be a go-to. And obviously, if you know he likes cannons, if he kind of has a lot of stalkers, if he's good at splitting up the units, maybe you just send in the Marines in the main, Hellions at the front, and you just try and do a bit of damage with the Marines, keep the Hellions poking, and you set up like a counter aggression. So um, going on to the last part of the video is going to be talking about transitions out of the build, because we've only talked about the aggression, we haven't really talked about what's going on at home. So that's what we're going to do in the next part. We talked a little bit about how to attack and how to do the build when attacking, but what happens if we're forced on the defensive? So right now I'm loading into one of my replays that I just did on my own. And basically this says if we have scouted, assuming that we scouted, no expo, probably 2 gases, maybe a chrono on a stalker with no Zealot, maybe a chrono on the cybercore. So we've kind of narrowed it down to like, we think this is probably blink stalkers. So how does the build transition from that? Now, we don't really want to just turtle one base against blink and not do anything. We want to try and harass him a bit. So the plan here is basically we're going to keep making Marines off the 1 racks. We're going to make our Hellion drop. We're going to send out just the Hellions and keep the Marines at home. And then we're going to add a bunker here, and then switch into tanks. So the first adjustment to the build we're going to make is basically as the start port is about to finish, we're going to take our second gas. Because if we don't take this gas, we're going to run into a little bit of gas trouble if we want to get a tank right away. So I'm going to speed it up, taking the second gas here, still making Marines constantly. I still have this depot set up for Mothership Core for deflecting it. It's not always necessary, but I think you should do this setup like almost no matter what. So here's the first bunker, a little bit early, but we want to basically kill off any stalkers that pressures us here, and then we're going to get one here eventually for around the time when Blink can finish. So here the drop goes out. I would recommend maybe sending it down here, like that way around, but you want to go for the main. You can send it out the other direction, depends a little on the map, both are fine. Just be careful it doesn't get picked off by going like here or here. Moving the factory a little bit back, the reason I don't put it right here is I don't want stalkers to be able to shoot at it from the low ground, so I've just moved it back a tiny bit. So from here, we need another depot. Basically, as soon as you finish the Hellions and lift off the factory, you want to start this depot right here. And then once we have the tech lab going, we're going to add our second barrack and a second bunker. The reason why we need a second barrack is we want to build an add-on back here for stim, so it's not that around to get killed. And we're going to start like floating a little bit of money. If you played against and expand into Blink, you could make a CC and then make the tanks, then make the second racks and the bunker. So this bunker right here, an important thing to note is you want to put it so far away from the edge that you can't shoot it from the low ground. And then obviously we're just going to put a tank right here, or right here, or right here. And then we're going to do this drop. So once you do the drop, it's really important that you drop and then try and kill probes. Once 2 stalkers show up, start shooting at the Hellions, just fly it out again. Because if he's doing a blink all in and he has like 2 or 3 stalkers stuck in his base, that's way worse for him than you having 3 Hellions and a medevac stuck somewhere on the map. So you want to basically just try and force a couple of stalkers to stay at home with this medevac, even if you don't do that much damage. It's basically so he can't focus all his units on attacking you, because you are a little weak until you have maybe 2 tanks. Now, as you can see, we're not quite ready for blink, but it doesn't hit quite yet. So you gotta be a little bit quicker this drop and getting it in, because you want to force the first couple of stalker warbins to be at home. So you then end up risking having all the stalkers hit you while you're not completely prepared. So try and get this medevac to his base pretty quickly, and then you can go into a relatively normal game from here. From this point, you get up to 2 tanks, you add your next expansion, try and keep the drop alive, and then you just go into a more normal game, which is a topic that is maybe a little bit too advanced for this video. Like, what do you do from there? But you basically can transition back into free access. You have a starport, you have medevacs, you have pretty quick stims, you can force the stalkers away, you have an expo, go into a normal macro game. So from this point on, we're just going to have a look at what we can do from the transitions out of the actual attack in case we don't have to be defensive. Going back to when the attacks actually moved out, we had our setup of starport and factory. We could build one mine with a mine center right here. In this particular game, I knew he expanded, so I wasn't afraid of a Stargate. If you were afraid of a Stargate, just make a winter mine center right here. Moving the racks over to right here so I can build a reactor and the expansion down. So this is a pretty basic setup. Now, there are 4 major transitions you can do from right at this point. There is basically an econ based build, which goes into triple command, which I will show you. There is a harassment based, which basically gets another medevac, gets 2 mines, keeps making marines out of this as soon as the reactor finishes, and goes into the multi-pronged harassment that I showed you in the game on Neoplan S, where you can follow it up with another mine drop, multi-pronged aggression with Hellions in the medevac and then mines somewhere else. Just keep harassing. There is what I like to call like a kill-based or control-based follow-up, which is basically when you do enough damage or force the Protoss composition to be stalker heavy enough that they can't really stop Marauder drops, you basically add 4 Raxes, which I will show you, and you go and kill them. And then there's the like defense-based, which is basically if he's doing some kind of 2-base all-in, or you just do so much damage that you know you have to defend. Because then suddenly you need bunkers, you might need tanks, you'll cut the 3rd CC in favor of like quicker axes. So we'll just go over them one at a time. So in this game, I'm basically going for the triple command follow-up, which is an economy-based follow-up. Now, the reason for that decision is basically I know that he expanded, so I know it's not an all-in. I have a really good idea of what his tech is because I haven't seen a lot of stalkers with my SCV when I scouted, and he was scouting with the mothership core, which generally indicates a little bit more defensive play than anything. So now I go in, my attack, that's fine. So at home, I basically waited on the reactor, I didn't make the mine, I just saved up the money right for the third command. Now, one of the reasons why you can do this kind of cutting corners for the third command is you can put this third command down right before the attack moves in. Like you can see that the command actually starts before the attack comes in. So I'll just show you guys. Like you can look at the minimap where my units are, and I have the third command on the way, and the attack is going in. So I don't have to multitask as hard because I already have it down. I already have rallied. I have it control group. Everything is fine. So it's a little bit of you generally want to get up the third command, or you want to get the reactor, mine, maybe a second barrack before you attack. Just you can build those buildings while we're moving across the map, and when you actually get to this point, you don't have to add more structures. You can just macro off hotkeys, and then you can attack. So here, the build basically goes into 3 CCs, and then eventually you can start adding the reactor, you can start adding mine, you can start adding more Raxes. So here everything comes down. We're just going to go to 3 Raxes, which is pretty standard. So now we have the setup for like a 3 CC, 3 Rax, Starport factory. Although it's not doesn't have add-ons, but it'll get there, and we're still being aggressive. So eventually you'll make one tech lab on this Rax, you'll make a reactor on the Starport when you want to stop harassing until or while you still want to harass, you'll just keep cranking out medevacs slowly. Like once you have 3 medevacs, that's kind of the max, but up to that point, you probably still want to make medevacs one at a time. You don't have that much money at that point. So that's basically the economy-based follow-up. Obviously, the macro can be kind of hard since you're doing so much aggression, but it's generally a great build. So from here, this is again the topic of, oh, well now you're in a standard macro Terran versus Protoss, where you know what the Protoss is doing, you've done a bit of damage, you've tried to force him to make mistakes, and you have a pretty reasonable setup at home. So this is another way to get to a macro game in a pretty safe way with a lot of good chances to win, and you're pretty even. So there's that. I'll move on and show you the next transition. So here's a game where I'm going to do a lot more of a defensive follow-up after the initial build, because what I've seen is basically I know he has double gas, I don't know where it's going, so since I don't know what his gas is going for, I'm going for this Widow Mine, which I want to put right here again, and then a medevac and the reactor right away. As you can see, I cut the third command and got all these units instead. So I still have no idea. I'm getting the second Rax because you need this Rax for stim. 2 Raxes, it's pretty fine. And then the attack comes in. So here is a point where the outcome of the attack actually determines a bit of which route I will go. If I do like a moderate amount of damage, like maybe 8 probes, like 8 to 10 probes, I would probably just add a third command and then eventually a third Rax, because then you're pretty even in economy. You haven't really forced his hand too much, but if you get more than that, well, you're actually in a shape where you should probably think about being a bit more defensive. So here, we're still just on the 2 Raxes, making these. Ended up here, going into space, and now I actually get to see a lot of gates. You can see he has 5 gates already, and this is a pretty big alarm bell. It's like, like I can see warp gate and more gates finishing, so this is kind of dangerous. So at this point, I'm still focused on the attack, but I have a bunker up at home, which you don't always need, but seeing the additional gates, I was very afraid of a counterattack, and because I'm pretty sure it's a counter all of a sudden, here we go. Like I'm gonna add 2 more axes. We're not trying to play this the long game. We killed 2 probes, which is not a lot, but he had nothing in the natural. We're pressuring the natural a lot. There's a good chance this will die. We've seen a lot of units from him, including sentries, which is also more of an indication of a bust, more often than not. We haven't seen a forage, we haven't seen a robo, we've just seen multiple games being added. Now, there happens to be a robo out there, but this could be a robo, it could be a Stargate. Stargate is less, what's the word? Stargate is less likely. There it is. Because we haven't seen it and it would have showed up by now. So there's a good chance this is like proxy robo, maybe just a ton of gates. We've seen so many stalkers and a sentry that we can kind of rule out DTs because a lot of the gas is invested right in this. You can look at this gas, 89 with 2 gas. So basically this follow-up just goes up to 4 vaxes, keeps making medevacs, makes mines. You can see the second gas is super late because we're not trying to start stim, we're not trying to start tanks because we're not playing against blink or anything. We just need marines. And eventually we're going to make bunkers. So here, I'm just going to fast forward a little bit to when the attack sort of ends. So we're going to kill this Nexus, which basically obviously should be, oh, we're not killing Nexus, wow. But it's like a big indication of trying to get a lot of units out. So I still know that he's at home. I actually don't know that these Immortals are out, but I want to keep pressuring him a bit because I think I can get this Nexus. Again, he still has a lot of units, and then the Nexus dies like, okay, well, now I know I need to be on the defensive. I'm bringing everything home, and then it's bunker time. I could have added this bunker slightly quicker. You can look at my money. I have a lot of money. And then seeing as we didn't see Robo, we didn't see Stargate, we didn't see a lot of sentries, now we could start worrying about DTs. So we'll get Danger Bay simply because he didn't go quick DTs, but he could have gone very slow DTs while being attacked. So this is more like a catch-all. I mean, his Nexus is dead, so we're playing safe. Now I see this, and you're basically set up to go. You have 4 Raxes, you have Widow Mines, you have time to build the bunkers. You know he's attacking you, and you can kind of go from there. So I've added all the replays that I've used. I'll link it below the video, and you can just check out how this goes. But it's a pretty easy hold, but I'm not going to waste more time on it. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is going to be the kill or control based version. So here's the kill or control based version of the build. So I didn't have a replay of this saved, so I've loaded up a custom game against an AI where I've just done the build. So there's no opponent in this game, but the concept is still the same. So here's the attack moving out. 8 Marines, the 3 Hellions, and my scouting SCV that's been out scouting the whole time, just so the build lined up. We have the basic setup again, getting the command center. We're making a mine and a reactor, and then we're going to make a medevac as soon as we can afford it. And we want to go up to 2 mines and 1 more medevac. The reason we're doing this is we basically want to complement this aggression with the mine drop as well. So we keep on the aggression. Otherwise, there's like a very big gap between your first attack and the follow-up. So this version of the build, you basically want to do if your opponent is being a little bit too greedy, which is like 1 gate and 2 forges and maybe a robo, or like 3 nexus of just the 1 gate and forge. Basically anything that involves delayed gates, like very delayed gates. So as long as he's on 1 gate, and then he can be on forges, robo, more nexus, it doesn't really matter. But like 1 gate for too long, if you scouted that with the SCV, or if you just feel like, you know, he's probably going to be a very, very greedy, like if he's that kind of player. So here, basically, we're making the 1 mine. We're going to make 1 more, and then the medevac one could afford it. And then immediately, as soon as we have the money, we're going to add 2 more Raxes and the second gas right away. So the plan here is basically send out the 2 mines in a drop and get 2 tech labs on these and go for stim and combat shield while still attacking. So the way you make depots from this point is basically as soon as one is finished, you just start up the next one like pretty much immediately after. You can have slight pulses if you're paying a lot of attention to your supply, but in general you can just start up the depot when the previous one finishes. So here, going into the 2 tech labs, these guys should always be attacking and just dropping, but there's no opponent, so I'm not doing that much. So here you start stim and then a cycle of marines. Make sure you keep building marines. The build is pretty tight here on money. So basically, once this marine finishes, you can start combat shield in the next cycle. That's just like a good like mental marker. Is once the first cycle of these racks is finished, just start combat shield, because combat shield is a bit quicker than stim, and even now it'll finish slightly before stim. So here, your setup is basically done. Make depots as soon as the previous one finishes, make one. If you lose a lot of units, you can chill on that, but if you're struggling a little bit with mechanics, just keep doing that. So now you can just like build SCVs on hotkeys, build out of free Raxes on hotkeys, and then just make medevacs one at a time, uh, as you can afford the gas. You can see I actually only had this first medevac, this drop one, then I started stim, and then one more, and then combat shield. So the gas lines up pretty well. So your next attack timing here is basically once stim is like 80% done, you bring up like your entire army together, and then you move. And your primary goal with this is, since he doesn't have a lot of gate units and shouldn't have tech units since you're harassing, you want to drop like right here or right here, like basically above the ramp or somewhere in the main where you can get um, enough surface area to hit the tech buildings. You're not really that interested in attacking the front. You want to go for the main, because if he has units at the front, it'll be very hard for him to come up the ramp, and you have enough medevacs and enough bio that you don't really care about the Nexus cannon. So this is pretty all-in though. Like, you have to basically do very crippling damage or kill him, because we're only on 2 command centers, and the big part is we don't have engineering base. So yeah, you could go for engineering base right here and take a third gas right as you get the engineering base, but you still have to do a good amount of damage. But the build is pretty well set up to do damage. We have a lot of army at this point. So that's basically it. That's the last transition. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it's helpful, and I will see you later.